Welcome back to Music Theory Logic. Today is going to be another music theory breakdown. It's been quite a while since I did one of these, but thanks to everyone who's been wanting more of these in the comments. Today I'm showing you What's Poppin' by Jack Harlow. Let's go ahead into the Logic session. So here we are in my recreation of the track. If you haven't seen one of these before, I'm not going to play the original audio. I'm going to play my recreation, which I've recreated all the different parts. The song is pretty simple in terms of the instrumental. Without further ado, here is my recreation. It's going to be a shorter edit since you're not hearing vocals. If you find these helpful, you would help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, here it is. Cool. So super short and concise. There's many different verses on this remix. But again, the instrumental repeats. It's got this main riff. Before I show you the individual parts, let's talk about the scale that it's in. It's in the key of E minor, E natural minor to be more specific. That has one black key. That black key is F sharp. That means the notes are E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, and E. E minor sounds like this. Not the instrumental, it sounds like this. Cool, and we have two chords in the song. We have an E minor chord, which we get from the first, the third, and the fifth notes. Those are an E, G, and B. That is a B on top. All right, then we get one other chord at the end, a passing tone. It's basically a C major chord. I've seen this described a few different ways. We also sometimes in the melody are essentially still hearing the trail of this F sharp, which makes this kind of a polychord, but again, E minor, C major. Cool, so going through the actual riff, the main part, the intro, has this on its own. All right, so again, the chords in E minor there, got that softer. I'm using the sustain pedal. So in MIDI, you can write MIDI automation for the sustain pedal. That's gonna help a lot. And it mimics the sound that you'll hear on the actual What's Poppin' record. I did a breakout video about making your piano sound more realistic and improving MIDI. I've talked about this a few times, so go see those other videos. The notes that we're using are G, A, G, F sharp, E, and then down to a B, F sharp, G. All right, rhythmically, it's an eighth note, 2 16th notes. Then the rest are eighth notes. We're at 145 beats per minute. This is pretty common for trap music, the like dance music genre of that, in addition to a lot of modern hip hop tracks like this. So in the intro, we get one minor change. It's kind of strange that this only happens really once. We get a B, F sharp. Instead of going back to the G, we have a B. These are really, really like small in the mix. The lighter the color, the softer the actual velocity of the hit. So the first, these first 5 notes are a lot more audible than this last one. Let's hear this. Cool. So, and then at the beginning, we get something that the fancy term for this is called diminution. It's where you take like the speed of something and you cut it in half. The melody is the same speed, but we don't get a measure without anything like we did before. So it's just squeezed together. And then the chords that are happening happen a little bit early. At the end, there's this weird thing where like the C is moved forward a 16th note. That gives it kind of like a syncopated feel there. So yeah, once again, a really, really subtle change that happens there. All right, so let's talk about the drums next. Drums are pretty simple. With the side note, we're going to talk about eighth note triplets in this. But so basically, we start out the drums and we get this fill, which is the only time we get really soft kick drum. So the cymbals are for the most part doing eighth notes. They're slightly swung out, so every other one is slightly back in time. I did that by hand because some of the automated swing stuff is complicated when you're doing faster rhythms. So I get a kick on one, 2 eighth notes on the next quarter note, so on 2 and then a kick on beat 4. Again, eighth notes are eighth note, or the closed hi-hat is an eighth note pattern, again, slightly swung. Then when the actual beat fully drops, we don't get any kick drum for the first 8 measures, or actually 4 measures. We do get the same 4 measure cymbal pattern repeating. So let's see here, this 4 measures. All right, so for the most part, we have steady eighth notes, again, swung out. It's a halftime backbeat. I'm using a snare and a clap there. Using the SP12 kit, just default to Logic. I am then compressing it a decent amount with my Slate FGX compressor. So it's 3 eighth notes in a row. Then we get 3 of these 16th or 8th note triplets. If I go this direction, so I did a former video, like a Logic Pro Tips video, about setting key commands for changing the division. So I have it set to the bracket. So when I hit a left bracket, it goes back to the 16th notes. Forward, that's 16th note triplets. Backwards is 8th note triplets. Backwards is 8th notes. So it's kind of a cool tool. So hopping over, it is fully in the grid. Again, those 3. Switching back to our 16th note grid, we get those 8th notes. Cool. The next measure, we get 3 of the triplets in a row, or with the next 8th note, steady 8th notes through the measure. We get a snare on the second 8th note. This is kind of like a fill snare clap type sound. And then on the same backbeat, we get the snare and clap together. All right, so that repeats fully. So the first measure of the drums is the same as the third measure. The fourth measure is slightly different. We don't get those fast trill or 16th note triplets. We just get 2 slightly out of time 16th notes. It's kind of like I guess an 8th note triplet. Then we get steady 8th note. So let's just solo that out and listen to it while we watch it go by. Here it is. All right. Again, after those 4 measures, we get the kick drum that drops. It's kind of a cool technique, not starting the kick right at the beginning. That guarantees that the song is going to get bigger at this point, which is exactly what happens if you go and listen to that What's Poppin' remix. So the kick drum is happening on beat 1. Then the 8th note right after beat 3, or the second 8th note after those that halftime. That backbeat, or halftime backbeat, I'm trying to say. So then we get the kick on 1. It's exactly the same. The second, or the 4th measure here, we get 2 8th notes on quarter note 2. Then we get the last 8th note. So with the kick drum, the drums sound like this. Let's make sure we get that first. All right, so with the piano, which is exactly the same as the intro, that is the first melody. Once again, that anomaly of the B, F sharp B, we don't really find another part of the song aside from things that are just like the intro where that repeats. So here it is with the drums. Here comes the kick. All right. Finally, the only other layer that we have instrumentally is an 808. This is a huge part of the whole genre, a huge part of trap music. A lot of the interest of the song comes from the 808. Let's watch it and listen to it, then I'll explain it. So the every 8 measures, that 808 pattern repeats fully. It's very similar. It's exactly the same rhythmically, the second 4 measures. So the notes that we're using are really similar to the riff. So once again, we're only using notes in the key of E minor. It starts out, we're doing E, then C. Those 2 notes are the root notes or the lowest notes of the chords. That makes sense. Rhythmically, we're on the 8th note after beat 2, and then on beat 4. When the drums start and the whole song gets going, we play an E on the downbeat. That's the root note. That's the same as the chord. That's our main scale. That totally makes sense. This right here is a fill, and the fill changes. Once again, this is like a huge part of the sound and like making an instrumental like this that's simple enough but also complex enough to be interesting. And like the 808 is a huge part of what makes this song pop, like what's poppin'. And so the notes there are going B up to F sharp, down to E. Rhythmically, it's on 8th notes on beat 2, hitting on beat 4. All right, that's the same as the kick drum. Now, these notes we find in the piano melody. So I've talked a lot, like right here, that B, F sharp. I've talked a lot about consistency or repetition in like all genres of music. It's part of what sounds like this 808 fits the actual piano sample. This comes out of like a bass player playing with a piano player and them jamming together. They're going to either play some of the same notes or sound like they're playing 2 parts of one greater piece of music. That's kind of the goal. So it makes sense that like those come from other parts in the song. So the first fill is going B, F sharp, E. The third measure, second repetition, we get E on the downbeat. Then we get B, F sharp, G to C. This is the same as that chord that stabs on that rhythm. All right. These are the same notes as the piano riff once again. Then it's almost like it repeats. E on the downbeat. Second time, instead of B, F sharp, we get E, F sharp. Also find those notes in our riff. We get an E on that last quarter note. An E on the, the 4th repetition. Final riff is going E, F sharp, G. So 1, 2, 3 from the scale. Down to C, once again, the same note we're doing in the piano, in the chord right there. So that makes sense. Let's play this one more time. I will highlight the MIDI so we can watch all this stuff go by. Here it is. Cool. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you found that helpful. If you found it helpful, you would help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel. If you have any tracks you want to see me recreate and talk about where the notes come from, I would love suggestions. Have fun making music. Remember, there are no rules to this. There's just studying, art that came before whatever you're making. It's always helpful to understand your own art and to understand sort of what you're hearing in music. So hopefully this helps you. Go make some bangers. I'll see you next time. Cheers.